Around this time in 218 BC, Hannibal fought against Rome in his first major set-piece battle at Trebia. And what I thought I could do was a couple of videos all about it. And what I want to start with is the beginnings of it all in terms of where he started from and how he got to Trebia. In 218 BC, around May, Hannibal left Cartagena, apologies for my pronunciation, which was his base of operations in what is now southeast Spain. Now, that might seem a bit strange because people think he was Carthaginian, and he was, but he actually left Carthage around the age of 9 and joined his father, who was campaigning in sort of southern, what is now Spain, and his brother-in-law, and he learnt a great deal from both of them. And in fact, really, southern Spain was pretty much where Hannibal learnt most of what he was then able to use on his campaigns towards and in Italy. In terms of the numbers that Hannibal had in that starting force that he took out from Cartagena, Polybius gives us a number. And Polybius, generally speaking, is pretty accurate, he's pretty good. At least he gets it in the right areas, so we think. And he gives a number of 90,000 infantry, 12,000 horse, and 27 elephants. And as you can see, Hannibal moves across in what is up the coast of what is now modern-day Spain. But during this, he's having to use up men, he's having to fight battles, and he's also supposedly posting men as well. So when he gets to the Pyrenees, the numbers have somewhat diminished. In fact, before he crossed the Pyrenees, he'd actually gone down to around 50,000 infantry with 12,000 cavalry. So you can already see just how many men he's either had to leave behind or lost during fighting. After travelling across, again, what is modern-day southern France, he has to cross the Rhone. And this is quite ingenious because in order to get the elephants across the rivers, he builds these big rafts so the elephants don't get too spooked. He's actually almost caught at this point by a Roman force. So he doesn't want to engage at all at this point because he needs his men, and he gets them across. And again, we have numbers for that point where he's able to start his summit of the Alps. Again, it's Polybius who's supplying these numbers, and he gives an approximation of 38,000 infantry and 8,000 cavalry. So you can see those numbers are dwindled down. Now, of course, that's going to happen through general attrition, but we can also suppose that he may have posted small detachments at strategic places along that line, because ultimately this route that he's trying to make here isn't a one-off. He wants to build a sort of corridor by which he can supply his forces in northern Italy, which is ultimately where he's trying to get to. By the time he's crossed the Alps and descended into northern Italy, we have another figure. And this figure's probably the most accurate one we have because it was recorded and actually seen by Polybius on a column, and apparently by Hannibal. And it gave the number of 20,000 infantry and 6,000 horse. You can see how much that number's dwindled. Again, attrition. We know that crossing the Alps was a very, very difficult thing. So you can see as he's moved across there's been, like I say, attrition. He's lost men through fighting, but he's also had to station them at various points, or so we think. Just before I finish then, a quick question I see sometimes asked: why didn't Hannibal use boats or ships? Why didn't he put his men in these and move them across the sea and land them somewhere in Italy? That's a good question. The reality is logistics were just clearly not available to him. You'd need a huge number of ships, and that would have just been a big... He might have all just written the Senate a letter saying, I am coming over by ship, please intercept me with a couple squadrons of Roman Navy detachments and sink me easily. Because after all, if you're moving men in those ships, they sit low in the water, they're transports, they're not fighting vessels. These are easy prey for any squadron, any navy. And Rome had a relatively decent navy at that point. He didn't. So they'd have to build even more ships in order to protect them. It would have just been a nightmare. And that's getting them across, avoiding storms, and then finding a bridgehead in Italy where he can securely land his men and not just have the Romans there waiting for him, because you're very vulnerable if you're doing that kind of operation when you first land. It's really, really dangerous. And yeah, he would have been, that just wasn't going to happen logistically and I think strategically as well. If you've got any questions about this, by the way, please ask them. And if you want to follow, I'm going to put hopefully a couple more videos up